Here we are.
Good
All right.
morning or good afternoon, wherever you might be.
Yeah. It's good. So this will be a fun day today. And again, anybody looking at this or checking out the recording, this is just like a AI coffee brief. We just kind of ad hoc talk about a few topics. It's not, regimented. We do bring some slides or things like that to talk to, but it's kind of very open and easygoing. So if you have any questions about AI or if you had any topics in general, we're happy to look at them, talk about them. For now, we're just bringing up hot things that we've seen out there in the market. So, Brendan, I've got something. I don't know what you've got. If you wanted to talk about anything, I'm open, you know, whichever direction.
No, I think you had mentioned a topic earlier in the week, so I think it is a good topic to discuss today because I think it's front and center on a lot of people's minds. And as we wrap up 2025, kind of seeing what's going on in all the major tech companies between investments in AI and layoffs and staffing, I think that there is an intersection, and I think the topic that you want to discuss kind of opens up the doors in there.
Yeah, exactly. So let me share my screen. We'll get into this. So the big thing, is okay. Right here, share, and do this. I think you can see my screen, right?
Yep.
All right, cool. So, like the big thing with AI, it's doing stuff. And how much stuff is it getting done? And then how much of that stuff is going to slowly but surely take things on that were usually what people were doing. Now, let's take a step back. In IT and technology and even business, one of the things I always tell folks is, well, what are people really doing? You know, and it's almost like people themselves are a form of technology. It's almost like we are middleware to different types of formats, whether physically doing labor, so we're transforming, physical things out there from dirt to concrete to roads, or, we're taking ideas and then making them come to fruition in software. Or it could be as simple as, I just got this Excel file with a bunch of questions because I work in the hospital and I have to audit, how the other how the nurses and doctors are interfacing with the patients. And when I audit them, I ask them questions and then I put them in my little Excel and then I grade those and then I distribute that info to the supervisors. And then they make sure that, oh, we're doing everything we're supposed to be doing. And all those steps were talking, typing, putting the data in Excel, and then getting that data formatted so then management can see how they're benchmarking. So that's why I always say we're the perfect almost system of middleware where we're taking data and information from different things, even systems that don't talk to each other, and then taking and formatting and putting it into the other system. So now AI, slowly but surely, is able to automate a lot of things, and we're moving past RPC into AI agents that can do a one-to-many kind of decisioning and stuff. And that question comes up: well, what happens if AI can do everything? And and AI is just the software, and further to that, what happens if you put the AI inside the physical machinery of a robot that has extremely good or exceeds the level of dexterity that humans have? Could they start building the roads on our behalf? Could they start doing, building the houses? Can they, do the typing in the Excel, from that example I had? And then that idea happens of, okay, what happens if AI takes all of our jobs? Well, there's a topic for that. And what I've been sharing on the screen is here, this gentleman right here, David, has been talking about this. And even way before this got mainstream on here, I've been thinking about this a long time. If you remember the 2016 election, where the presidential candidates were talking, they always get on a debate and talk about job loss. And the big thing was, okay, where are the jobs for coal? Where are the jobs for this? And then the one thing I thought about at the time was, because even in 2016, robotics and automation was out there. I said, why isn't anybody talking about automation and how that's really going to be eating up jobs? Lo and behold, here we are, talking about this
Yep.
very topic.
Yep.
So then there's this topic of, well, what do you do if all jobs are done for you? And that comes up with the topic of post-labor economics. Now, this is a whole lecture series, so I don't, what is it? Both all these together, there's probably like 6 hours of content where
Wow.
David does a lot of research on, how to break that down. These are all YouTube videos, but of course with AI, I used AI to kind of break down some of these topics. So what did I do? I took one of these videos itself, and then I pumped it into Notebook LLM, and then I created basically a mind map. This will kind of facilitate our discussion here, and it kind of helps me remember all the topics.
Yeah, and for our audience, Robert, if they haven't experienced or used Notebook LLM, I think this is a great place to kind of plug some of the features and possibilities within that. It comes free with any Google account that you have, and it is an amazing tool that can do deep research on your materials. It can do, like Robert's going to demonstrate here, mind maps. It can change lengthy documents into podcasts that you can listen. So, we highly encourage anybody that has not tried Notebook LLM to give it a try. And, you just log in, do a search, and just log in with your Google account and, feed it some information and see what it can do.
Yeah, it's fantastic. So I'll walk you through what I did also. So I have the Notebook LLM. I took the hyperlink of one of these YouTube videos. So previously, before Notebook LLM, how did I do some of this stuff? I would take the link from YouTube, I would put that into a website to transcribe the YouTube. Then I would take the transcription and feed it into my AI to help me with summarizing the discussion points and then formulating,
Yep.
understanding and if I needed to talk about a topic. Now, I just take the hyperlink and put it into Notebook LLM, and guess what? I say, you know what? Make me a mind map on the topic. So on this, here's the future of post-labor economics. This is only one of those videos. So this is like a subset of the many, but this is really kind of the high-level one that talks about kind of the big picture stuff. So, in this video, it's all about, well, what's the impact of automation? And so let's go through those, and then you start to decouple when thinking about AI taking jobs. It's really a plethora and a dynamic kind of topic. There's many different pieces of this, and then not all things are going to convert as fast as others. So that's the other thing is, some things are very fast. So like it's easy for like Notebook LLM. Guess what? When people have back end staff to help them prepare their podcasts and YouTube video content, they probably had staff that did a lot of research. Well, now you compress the time to do that. AI probably, basically has taken jobs from that community of YouTube creators and this kind of stuff. That happened fast. The other things are going to be very slow.
Yep.
You're not going to be having robots doing brain surgery for probably a while, without the assistance of humans in the loop and stuff like that. So some things are going to be a lagger, but we're in this phase. So to break that down, there's an impact to the automation, and this is broken down into, basically what'll happen. Okay, let's say AI is taking over many jobs. Well, guess what? It's going to start to impact the wages. It is going to form inequality with that, and I think this breaks it down to another level. Yeah. So based off his research, let's say if it's all in, everything starts to really shift towards from not many jobs to many jobs being affected, well, it is going to basically affect wages. And the reason why, it's just because of availability. If you can pay less, just like when the industry started outsourcing a lot of work to Asia, India, or South America, that was to lower the cost of goods to be manufactured, etc. It's the same thing for knowledge work. You know, getting AI to do a lot of the jobs is beneficial because it gets you on more of the thinking stuff. But I think it's based off the research he did. It's really going to be 50 to 70% of wages are going to have a structural change. Then what it's going to fundamentally push, and this is something, Brennan, if you really think about, and I have something later that isn't entirely addressed by what he says and a lot of people say, but it's something I still think is going to be a big impact, but I'm going to save that. So the other thing is, once you have wages going a lot, you're starting to decouple the productivity and wages, because usually, even right now, I do a lot of we do a lot of consulting jobs, and what is that those jobs break down to? Well, what's your rate, and how much work can you do for that rate?
Right.
And a lot of times you don't necessarily have a fixed bid. That's because there's a certain productivity of, we give value, and then the company gives us an hourly rate for that productivity that we can outproduce their own in-house folks on.
Right.
Well, what AI is going to do is it's going to decouple that, because guess what? The productivity levels, as you see by just creating this mind map, and this probably took 2.5 minutes to create after I imported the YouTube, your productivity is just going to exponentially increase, because you have AIs right now assisting to, in the future, AI is doing it all. Everything, basically unattended, research, unattended software updates to itself, unattended looks at the process and workflow, and all that. And then basically, when you're based off a capitalist type of economy, then that basically is going to push down your wages. Then you're essentially going to have a decline in labor share in proportion to the GDP. So then what do all those people do? I'm going to pause there in case I'm letting the juices flow in your head.
Yeah. No, this is really fascinating, and I think there's a lot of things that we're seeing in the market today, from a lot of the minimum wage efforts across many states. Just here in California, I think it's rising to to around $20 an hour now. Mm-hmm. And so, when we're looking at this decoupling of productivity and wages, I believe that there's probably a shift coming. And if you look at kind of the traditional models, just like you mentioned, how much work can I get for a certain wage? I think that is going to be switching to how much value can I get for a certain wage, right. Where value is not necessarily tied to productivity. So if you have a highly valuable person that could come in, revolutionize a product, and that revolution generates a doubling of the revenue, that person is highly valuable. What they're contributing is highly valuable. And, maybe that person can do it in a week's work. Maybe that person takes, 80 hours a week to do it. There's a difference there. So I think, when we look at productivity, a lot of that productivity was based on inefficient processes, which AI is going to replace. So I really believe we're going to be switching to more of a value model, and that value model is going to generate new opportunities for everybody. How do I create value for the business? How do I create value for the accounting department? How do I create value in the fast food restaurant? And I think if we focus, or if you're looking for jobs, or you're in a current job and you start looking at the value, that is one way and one area where you can protect yourself, because the AI is going to get rid of the manual work, the process work, and what is left is going to be that value component. But, I think that's just kind of uncovered from this mind map that you're sharing here.
Right. And I'm going to pause on the mind map. So part of this is you can have the Google Notebook LLM, basically create like a infographic.
Yep.
So in this infographic, these are basically the big ticket discussions in here. Like, so as you're migrating more and more work, and this work is universal. So it's not like when farming got rid of the plow. Getting rid of the plow only affected those people in that industry doing that type of role. With AI, because it's so multi-purpose, it's almost like introducing electricity.
Yes.
Electricity is used for everything, including our discussion right here. So then, so the big thing is, what do you do? And so the big ticket items is, there is that topic of universal basic income, where you have a unconditional financial floor, but this is not going to be the only solution. And so this is, I think, a lot of people see that as the one and done kind of solution. But according to David's research, there's other things that have to be put in place, and that includes a topic such as a social wealth fund, which Norway apparently is already doing. And this is where everybody in a geographic area almost earns the respective income generated by that region's resources. So
that's interesting. Okay.
Yeah. So as you're feeding into the AI machine or whatever, your region producing the resources to facilitate that, you essentially get a cut of that. And again, these two things so far is to support the notion of having an income and spending, etc.
And that's an interesting model, and I think it's something that could be, something that is kind of in place, but in a different aspect, in a different industry. When you look at Hollywood, I was just talking with my brother, and long ago in a movie, Battle for Los Angeles, some of you watching may know that movie. He was a stunt double in a helicopter scene.
Oh,
and he was just sharing with me that he still gets checks to this day from the revenue that film generates, just based on there. And I think that is so important. He provided value to that movie, and now he has a revenue stream. Now, granted, it's not huge, but it's a revenue stream that basically lasts as long as that asset is producing revenue.
Right.
And I think we work in these large companies. We do a lot of big giant things, but once you leave that company, you're never paid. You're never rewarded for that value that you created for that company. Now, I'm not saying that is that you should be forever, but it's just interesting that in Hollywood, it works a little bit different. And I think the social wealth that you kind of covered right here, it kind of touches a little bit on that, because if AI is generating all the revenue and all the wealth, who actually benefits from that wealth? And it's very easy to consolidate that into a handful of people, and take advantage that a lot of people don't have the opportunity to. So that's an interesting concept.
Yeah, and what's interesting also is it's not even new. This is the same stuff they do in Alaska. All of them get basically a cut from all the oil drilling and stuff that goes on in Alaska.
Right.
Up there, so this stuff happens. It's just kind of like for 90% of everybody else, we're just not used to this concept. But I think it's something that he said will have to be revisited, as basically all this work is offset to the AIs and robotics.
Yep.
Then there's a concept here where you get capital endowments, which are basically investments into the assets that are generating those things. That way, you've got this collective, these funds that are generated from the resources, and then you have basically prioritization to keep it reinvesting. That way you don't deforest or do things like that. You got to keep it going. So that keeps it going. Then right here is basically protecting data, because obviously AI is going to consume the world with data, but it's almost like unionizing your data on that, and then having basically data that's, if it's yours, it's yours. that kind of stuff. And these two I forgot, and I'd have to remember based off reading the and listening to the YouTube. But these were other two instances of things that put into place, which is digital native co-ops. It's almost like just like a co-op, but from a digital sense when you're working with code or working with the AIs, etc. Um, and then basically transferring, and this is another topic.
Yeah.
There are some manufacturing companies that all the people making the things, the widgets, are basically owners of the business, and all the profits are essentially redistributed. So that's the same thing as, maybe these models, like our worker co-ops, are basically becoming an alternative form of ownership.
Yeah, and that last concept is really interesting. I was on a call with a large digital influencer, and that very topic came up. And someone had asked him, what are you teaching your children today? Are you teaching them, how to make digital AI influencers, teaching them how to code? And he said, no, I'm not teaching them any of that stuff. They'll learn it, but by the time I teach them, in 3 years, it's going to be obsolete. It's going to be different. So what he is teaching them and the values that he's instilling are exactly that ownership. How to become an owner, how do you market yourself, how do you build your brand, and how do you manage a business. And those are the skill sets that he is teaching his children right now. So it very much goes into that last topic, where I think that a large part of the new model is going to be individual ownerships in pieces or process or value pieces of a business.
Yeah. All right. So going back over here, so those are kind of like the big ticket items. But again, going into the mind map right here, AI is impacting wages. So now I'm going to shrink that back down. The job market's going to have to be restructured. So that means it's going to impact the middle class quite a bit. You're going to have job polarization, where depending on the job you have, it's going to be, very set on skills, etc.
Yeah.
And then there's the big one, is the shift on to non-routine cognitive tasks. And the reason he emphasized on this is all routine tasks that can be done over and over are basically low-hanging fruit for AI to automate and do themselves.
Yeah. Yeah.
100%. So any job that has that is essentially going to be evaporating pretty soon. And then you've got the business drivers. What's businesses are all over this, and anecdotally through non-public resources, I'm already seeing where some people are referencing how complete sales departments are being consolidated to AI agents that are essentially doing that, likely because it was routine, repetitive tasks, code calling, following on emails, this kind of stuff that was essentially busy work, and everybody got stuck in the busy work. And guess what? All that shifted to AI, and so you could reduce your staff down by 80% because, in essence, it was occupying basically dead space with your workforce anyway.
Yeah.
So anyway, that's basically where it's going now. On the pendulum can keep swinging, which is basically, could you get to a trend where you have zero workforce at all? That could actually happen depending on what kind of business it is, where all those tasks that you had to run the business were all done by people because you were forced to do, and there was no means to automate it. It's almost like you would have paid for the services had they been there, but AI essentially brought it to the forefront almost all at once. So it seems like it hits like a wave. But that's the other item for business drivers. And that's probably like, those are basically all those big impacts. And then going over here, there's the redistribution of models. If all jobs are gone, how do you support income? And then there go those items that we talked about right here: universal basic income. There's another name, basic dividend, or economic agency index. It's almost like setting a benchmark for different areas to get different amounts of money. Then there's this concept of that collective wealth. So if you have, like, let's say, as the example with Norway or Alaska, you have this oil fund that's basically redistributing income to the people because that's a part of their local area. There's this other concept, land value tax is another one. I don't remember the definition of this one, but basically, I think this is where if you live in Colorado and you have a vast array of resources, that you get dividends for people using and visiting that. It doesn't just go into one entity; it gets redistributed back to the people in that area.
Interesting. Okay.
And I don't know these two. I don't remember these two at all. Baby bonds. I think this is collecting money at the beginning, so it snowballs. And those capital endowment programs was in the other slide. Now, here's what I was saving. This is probably the biggest pain point or item that is very interesting is if where's the income support? I know where it is. Let me go back to showing this one up here, which is the business drivers. So let's say the business drivers keep trending towards that optimal workforce, trending to zero.
Yep.
Even if you're in construction, let's say at some point they get robotics and they build everything. There's almost a catch-22. If there's no workers to get paid to produce what the business is selling, then who's purchasing those services if none of them are employed at all? And
Right.
money is basically a form of barter. It's like a universal barter medium.
Yep.
But if nobody's working, then there's nothing to barter. Then and so what I was saving is, my thing is, and this was not covered in his literature, is my thing is, well, what is the point of even having universal basic income? Like, what are you actually spending your money on if AI and robotics combined can essentially produce every service and construct everything that you need to survive? Because income is there to get things. I need food, I need a house, I need to pay an airplane to fly me over to a different country to go on vacation. If all those things are automated, well, what is the whole point of even having the economy at all? And so that's my big thing is, a lot of these concepts might be good to think about now, but they might not even end up being anything that comes up, because if my kids are basically getting ready for college in the next 2 years. If this takes off, and I don't think it's going to take off that fast in their generation, but if it gets to that point where everything is made by AI, then there's no point of having the income, because you could just essentially go into the queue to have a home built, and then you just choose an area to live in the home, and then robotics build your home, and then the things you order online for the furniture, the TV, etc., were all essentially mass produced by AI robots and automation, and then that's all delivered to you. So then, why pay for it if it all can be done anyway? So that's where my mind was going, questioning the whole point of the monetary economy in general. All right, back to this. Then there's alternative ownerships. These are these land trusts to make sure that companies just don't essentially force everybody into a small square area of the world. Have you ever, Brennan? Did you ever see one of those infographics that said, if the whole world was built like Paris was built, then everybody in the world could fit into a tiny area in Texas, no more than 40 miles by 40 miles wide.
No, I never saw that. That is fascinating though.
Right, and that's basically why I could see them, him highlighting community land trust to make sure that people aren't essentially squeezed like sardines into the same concentration. Like one of these, they have these mega apartments in China. There's like 50 or 60,000 people living in, 2 apartment buildings, and they're just monolithic in size. You could do that for an entire area and essentially fit the entire population of the world into only a small area.
Wow, that's fascinating.
It's very scary. Anyway, that's the kind of stuff that really will come up as what's fair, this kind of stuff.
Yep.
And then it goes into further, what's the human role? Like if everything is done, like what do people do? Because a lot of people want purpose and they want to do things. I myself have friends that basically their MO is, I need to feel useful and I need to feel like I'm contributing to society.
Yep.
They want purpose. And then, then it becomes real hard to figure out what your new purpose is, in a world where everything is made by the robotics powered by AI.
Yep.
But at the same time, Brennan, I think, we're in 2026. This stuff is still, 5 years for the low-hanging fruit, even for robotics. In a different video, David was doing some calculations, and he says to ramp up, if you switched all factories to start making robots, in order for them to make things and do stuff, we're still 50 years out to being able to make enough robots to replace all labor with our current population.
Right.
You'd have to essentially at least make, probably 6 billion units, even if they're twice the efficiency of a human, to even get to the level that's needed. Not to mention all the logistics, power, and all that kind of stuff of running them. So anyway, we still have a good runway here. And then there was the other thing down here, which is implementation challenges, one of which, like I said, the ramp up of the robotics. So the big one right here, this one is like the political funding and political will. Like at one point, AI, will challenge even our own governmental system. Like we have people that are voted into place, at least in the U.S., through the Electoral College to represent what the grander population wants. But you could probably challenge that if you have a perfect system that can make perfect decisions. I bet you a lot of that governmental decision making can be offloaded to AI, where you cut out the middle person, and then basically people vote, and then the AI essentially institutes those laws, et cetera, directly. So that's another thing that it's going to challenge. So it's not even work of us doing. It's like the fundamental process of how we govern the entire population is probably going to be challenged.
And that one is a really fascinating topic as well, because I think there's a lot of gray area when you're talking about laws and rules and regulations, and interpretation. And I would argue that it's nearly impossible for a machine to get the correct interpretation correct, and that is where the human in the loop comes into place. Right. And I had this discussion with a well-known judge in California, and right now they're facing this very problem. A lot of the rulings and some of the lawyers are using AI to generate opinions and generate cases to reference. But what they were finding is that the context was being lost. So while maybe the argument stood, the context was incorrect. So the opinion was not right. So what California is doing, at least in the judicial system, is right now for judges and other areas, they're not allowed to use AI for the legal opinions. Now, when it comes to the lawyers, they're still able to use AI, but they will crack down very heavily where references are wrong. So, like for example, he had an account. I'm sorry, a case where he was reading the papers that were submitted, and it referenced a court case that was entirely made up. It didn't exist. So so when he contacted the lawyer, he's like, "Oh yeah, AI just failed. I'll fix it." And he's like, "No, you don't just fix it. That is a critical error." And they fined him, I think, $10,000 and put him on suspension. So that is something that is happening right now as we're speaking, and the judge that I was talking to is very concerned about that. So yeah, I think that is a place that we'll have to watch. I mean, I know I would not want to be governed by a entity that just follows strictly the rules. It's that's not how anyone wants to be governed.
Yeah. And I think that's the point that it will have to be worked through. There's probably a subset of things that could be offloaded.
Yes, absolutely.
Like obviously AI could probably comb through all legislation and find out, oh, what's this law about? You're not allowed to tie your alligator to a fire hydrant. This makes no sense. Get rid of it. That kind of stuff is very easy. Point taken, interpretation, and then also laws have to be almost with that interpretation right sized to the current times.
Yep.
One of the hardest thing, and that's why we have to always go to the Supreme Court or do all this other stuff, is there's that whole thought of, well, what was the point of this law when it was put into place, and how does that contrast to where we're at now? And it's almost like a juggling act on how you get these laws to still, a lot of older laws, be in place given how everything has changed through the world. All right, so I think those were kind of the big points I had. The last one I had right here, and I'll go to full screen, is, and again, Notebook LLM, there's a whole presentation on this. Now, I didn't want to just click a slide and talk to the slides. We always want to have kind of an open discussion during this, but there's a whole slide deck right here on a lot of the statistics that were discussed in the presentation. As the big thing is, this supports the argument about the productivity versus wages. That's been happening a long time with automation in industrialization. But if you look here, this trend could continue where wages are stagnant. They might go up a little, but productivity, I think, is going to be almost like a curve that goes up quite steeply very shortly. And then that's where the big gap is a lot of things can be done and people aren't going to be paid for it. And it's going to be very hard to essentially pay the right amount, which goes back to my own view of, I think the bigger thing is questioning the economy as a whole in general. Again, I think a lot of people are fixating too much on wages in money, because at some point when everything is made, then what is the point of the money? And then I think the other part is people worry that there's going to be a concentration of ownership with a lot of these large companies or multi-billionaires that own where things are made and how they're made. But again, pish posh, all that is eliminated. There at some point there will be no such thing as a billionaire if I can have a robot essentially make the same yacht as one of the billionaires. Just make it, and then it basically comes to fruition. I think the real limitation is, can we have 100 billion yachts floating in the ocean? Everybody wants to make one. No, right. I think we're gonna challenge even how the the capitalist model works.
Yep. And just some fascinating stats that I've been seeing. So we're hearing a lot of churn. So like in 2025, there was a large cut by Amazon. Around 14,000 people were laid off. But conversely, they hired about 11,000 new workers, but specifically for AI roles. So there's a lot of churn in the marketplace and in the workforce, and I think it's some of those repetitive jobs, those jobs that can be duplicated by AI, but then they're being replaced by other types of jobs. Maybe not in every industry, but certainly in some of the larger tech companies. And then there's also another fascinating one that I read about. It basically exposed that some of the industries that are using AI and they're using it correctly have 3 times higher growth per revenue. Revenue per employee versus a company that doesn't use AI within their workforce. But at the same time, part of that formula is that those companies with the AI have a leaner total staff. So naturally, if you have less employees and the same amount of revenue, your revenue is going to go up per employee. So those are just some fascinating things to kind of watch in the marketplace and see where those new jobs are starting to be produced. But right now, a lot of it is in data engineering. Obviously, anything around AI training and AI ethics and governance. That's another big area. And then some of the new roles are like AI powered product managers and integration specialists. How to integrate all of these new tools into the legacy systems. So those are some of the bright spots that I think you can look for in the new economy.
Yeah. It's it's spot on. Just like there's going to be opportunity for new things that we didn't even think about were going to be coming out. We fail a lot to think about things that are in the future, which everything we've gone over here, there's a grain of salt with it, because this is with our current mindset and current data.
Yep.
Just like when refrigeration displaced milk delivery, the refrigerator opened up a whole new economy with food in the kitchen, ice cream, all this stuff related to that, the maintenance and sale of the refrigerator, the designs, all that is probably 10 times the amount of economic growth compared to what milk delivery was itself. So I think there's probably a lot more to come. And I think realistically, if a lot of these jobs are essentially automated, we just get used to whatever the next thing is. That could be, heck, it could be the utopia of, where it's almost like you're a kid again, where you wake up and you do all the cool stuff and everything is essentially provided because all the robotics and AI is essentially there doing the other stuff that used to take people hours to do. Even right now, if you look back to the mid 1700s, people worked on a farm for 14 hours a day, and they almost had children simply for the purpose of putting the children to work to help them work on the farm to produce more things because they needed help. And now what do we have? We're already getting Kroger delivery orders sent to our homes automatically. At some point in the future, all the food, et cetera, will be grown, maintained, et cetera, by automation. So that just means more time, for us to do other stuff.
Yep.
All right. So let me see. What else did I have on here? This is probably more breakdown. And I think this explains that economic agency index that I was pointing out that I forgot what the definition of was earlier. And I think that's just combining labor, capital, and public transfer, like UBI, the dividends that we mentioned, and then baseline salaries.
Yep.
Cool. All right. Well, I think that's all I've got. There's a lot of other stuff, and then we can I can provide the links to get this material.
Yeah, certainly. Yeah, that was a great overview, and I think it also illustrates the power of Notebook LLM. So, if anybody is interested in the material that we just shared today, just drop us a link, contact us on LinkedIn. And if you have ideas or want to be a guest, same thing, just contact us on LinkedIn and we'll discuss what you want to share, and we'll invite you on. So, yeah, I think we're at about our time limit, Robert. So I think, if there's nothing else, we can wrap this one up.
Yeah. Sounds good. Thanks.
All right.
Brendan.
Yeah, this was a great discussion. So hopefully everybody enjoyed that.
Cool.
All right. Until next